Record. Okay, we're video and audio. Are we live, Tom? Excellent. Hey, folks, out in CPAC land, this is Paul Croteau, FTR Radio. I am live with John Dennis, a name you may not be familiar with, but when you find out who he ran against, you'll say, oh, that guy is John Dennis out of the 8th District of California. You ran against Nancy Pelosi.
I did.
The Wicked Witch of the West.
I
Talk
did.
about that race, what it was like going up against her and her resources and her willpower.
Well, the resources were one factor, but we raised a lot of money too. We raised $2.5 million and had about 40,000 donors. But the real difficulty was just the inertia. People feeling like, no Republican is serious in this town, and
Right.
it's not viable. But what's interesting is as we grew in name recognition, we converted a lot of people, and we did, and ultimately ended up doing better than any Republican has ever done against Nancy Pelosi.
Right. Got it. So, I'm not a political expert. I'm just a dad and tech guy during the day and such. So, I'm not privy to the things that go on in elections.
Sure.
Was it a clean environment? Was it a hospitable race? Was there dirty back dealings? Were there any threats? Were there any issues you had to deal with as an opposing candidate to Nancy Pelosi?
Oh, yeah, like all sorts of little things. I mean, she of course wouldn't debate. You mentioned the Wicked Witch of the West, which
Yes.
is a pretty pedestrian idea when you think about Nancy Pelosi. So we took it and ran with it.
Yes.
We created a video where we depicted Nancy Pelosi as the Wicked Witch of the West, and it went viral, and it had about 750,000 views in about a week. And at the end of that first week, we got a copyright infringement complaint on YouTube from EMI for some music that was reminiscent of the Wizard of Oz music,
Yeah.
but not.
It wasn't
copies.
the actual. Yeah.
Well, they just EMI dragged their feet. They wouldn't give us a license, and we didn't even want to fight them. It was ridiculous. But at the end of the day, we settled with them for $1,000 and learned afterwards that all of the officers of EMI are large contributors
It's the
to
entertainment industry.
the
Absolutely.
Democratic Party.
Yeah, there's only 3 or 4 music companies now, and EMI is a very large one. So.
This is the shenanigans that you can get
You
away
have that
with
money.
using stuff like copyright infringement and intellectual property laws.
Exactly. Now, I heard someone say that Nancy Pelosi had to change offices, and she's not hanging any pictures up in her new office because she said, I'm not going to be here very long. One of my big concerns is voter fraud, especially on the left. Do you think there's anything we can do to combat voter fraud in California and Texas and Detroit and other places where it's a big deal?
Well, the first thing we need to do is identify the areas where it really matters.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to most of the candidates who do polling, I mean, if a candidate isn't complaining about voter fraud, it's because they did polling that reflected that they weren't, that they were going to get the outcome that actually happened. But in the areas where it matters, I think you have to use all the resources that you can and every technique possible to keep people from committing fraud. None of the truth is this: is that if you notice, none of these lawsuits after elections ever work.
Right.
You have to prevent it before it happens.
That's what it is. It's one of the many tactics.
Yep.
So looking back at the campaign, of the things you could change, what would you change, if anything?
Spend a lot more time working in the district to raise my name recognition. I mean, we did very well on the national level, and I think we did better than any Republican ever has. But we really needed to dig in and understand what the nature of that problem was, and force the local media to pay attention to us. Drive that. We had I think we had a very big grassroots campaign organization. A lot of resources. Could use them better. But on the other hand, we were exceptionally good at fundraising. We were exceptionally good on the national level. We were exceptionally good, online. And I think we set a pretty high bar for anybody who's going to follow us.
Do you think the Northern California can turn, or is it like Massachusetts, pretty much stuck cast in stone the way it is now?
I think it's possible, but it'll take a couple of things. I think you'll have to have a candidate who's been around, who people are comfortable with, and they get it. You have to give the voter the opportunity to get over the Republican label.
Yeah.
They got to know you, and then they've got to get over it, and then they've got to make the decision from there. And I think if you come up with the right positions, and we're active, I think we can convert some folks.
So speaking with John Dennis, who ran against Nancy Pelosi in the California 8th District right now, what's next for you?
Well, we rolled over a little bit of extra money that we had from the campaign into a PAC, and so doing that, we're going to start an institute that'll be ready probably in the fall. So work on education issues. What's the appropriate role of the government in our lives? The importance of individual liberty. And we'll support candidates who we feel comfortable with, issues that we feel comfortable with, and then we'll just keep active. I mean, for me, it's not my driving ambition to be a politician. I'm much more concerned about the issues and making sure that we have this, like I said before, we really understand what the appropriate role of the government is in our lives, because I think if we understand that, then we have a much better chance of actually reducing the size of government.
I agree. The thing is getting the folks on the left to change their view of what the appropriate role of government is in our lives.
If you think about it, there's so many things that you can actually reach out and work with on the left, things that make sense. But the one thing that I'd like to help them with is understanding why property rights are such a critical part to a free society. Yeah. And maybe we can make some headway with that too.
So California is sinking financially. It's sunk. It should be underwater. It is underwater completely.
Right.
What is
it's
needed?
Insolvent.
What's needed to fix California? What actually can be cut or changed to make that state financially stable?
Well, I have to tell you something. I think everything can be cut. People make it seem like it's this crisis to cut the government. Here's what we do. Let's cut government and have, first of all, tell the media blackout. Don't say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Cut the government, and then tell me if anybody complains.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone will notice.
I like that. They won't know.
I mean, let's not cut off the checks that people are expecting for their support. Although we have to start weaning that down, of course, over time. The social support, but start cutting out all these other services, and then tell me if anybody notices.
Isn't the initiative process in California a risk for that?
A risk for what?
A risk for overturning it, because pressure groups on the left can get enough signatures these days with modern methods. You can get enough signatures for everything.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, this is the difficulty of democracy. I wrote a blog this week quoting Mencken that said that democracy is the theory that the people know what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. What we have is limited government. We shouldn't be able to vote on a lot of things.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to vote on how somebody else spends their money.
Right.
You don't deserve, just because you have a vote doesn't mean that you deserve to have a hand in somebody else's pocket. There should be limits on the initiatives. What can you vote on? Again, this goes back to this issue of what the appropriate role of the government is in our lives, and it's certainly not full access to your bank account.
Right. So I was focused on the Texas elections as I lived there, and so not as aware of the situation or issues in California. What were some of your key platform stances? What are the issues that are really affecting Californians that you think you can affect change on if you're elected?
Well, this discussion. I mean, opening people's eyes up to what is it that you're actually supporting. I mean, let's say you're a big government liberal. Mm-hmm. I mean, have you actually spent time going through what the Department of Commerce does? I mean, do you really support, as a big government liberal, what they do? Aren't most of the things that the Department of Commerce does supports for indirect subsidies for corporations? We can find common ground. I want to cut it. Now maybe you, Mr. Liberal, want to cut it. I mean, those were some of the issues. Actually, look at what the government does. We have no choice. We have to cut. We've got to cut spending, and we need to promote growth. So let's find the common ground where we can do that. I think that one of the areas where we found common ground was on spending for foreign military bases. I don't particularly find that as part of defense. I find that our positions in foreign military bases. I find it having very little to do with the defense of the people who live in this country.
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly willing to put that on the table and say, let's cut that spending. So those are some of the issues that we put on the table to get people's attention, and it worked to some degree.
Outstanding. Any final thoughts you'd like to get out there? How do we get in touch with you to learn more to help support you?
So the organization is the Freedom and Prosperity PAC, and it's FAPPAC.org. John Dennis Report, you can find out what I'm doing there, JohnDennisReport.com. And come to the website, sign up, and get our updates, our newsletter updates, and hopefully when we have the PAC site rolling, you can help support us.
John Dennis, California 8th District, thank you so much.
Thank you,
for coming
Paul.
by. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.